The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, thick and cream-colored like something you'd see in a corporate boardroom. My name was written across the front in Sophia's careful cursive, the same handwriting I'd watched develop through years of homework and birthday cards. I was in my kitchen, nursing my second cup of coffee and watching sparrows fight over seeds in the backyard feeder, when I slid my thumb under the seal. The first thing I saw was a number: $125,847.32. It hit me like a punch to the chest, the kind that knocks the wind out of you before your brain can catch up to what's happening. Below that astronomical figure was an itemized list that read like a luxury catalog. Chateau Belafonte venue rental, $45,000. Michelin-starred catering by Chef Laurent, $38,000. Vera Wang bridal suite, $12,000. Maldives honeymoon package, $18,000. At the bottom, in Sophia's neat handwriting, a note that made my hands tremble. Dad, since you've always been so generous, we knew you'd want to help make our dream day perfect. Be grateful we're letting you contribute to something this special. Be grateful. The words echoed in my head like a slap that keeps stinging. For a moment, I just stood there in my quiet kitchen, holding a bill for more than most people make in 2 years, for a wedding I wasn't even invited to. Because that was the other thing. 3 weeks earlier, Sophia had called to uninvite me. Her exact words were, "Dad, Raymond and I have decided we want a more intimate ceremony. Just close friends and people who really understand our vision. People who understand their vision." Apparently, that didn't include the man who'd raised her since she was 3, after her mother walked out on us both. I set the papers down on my kitchen table and looked around the modest home I'd worked 60-hour weeks to pay for, the same house where I'd bandaged Sophia's scraped knees, helped with algebra homework, and celebrated every achievement from first steps to PhD graduation. The irony wasn't lost on me. I wasn't sophisticated enough for their vision, but my money was apparently exactly what they needed. That was the moment I realized they were about to learn the difference between funding and attending. To understand how we got here, you need to know about Raymond Thornfield. He swept into Sophia's life 2 years ago like a character from one of those romance novels she used to read as a teenager. All charm, good looks, and family money that came with a pedigree but not much actual cash flow. His parents owned a vineyard in Napa that looked impressive on Instagram but hadn't turned a profit in years. Raymond was everything I wasn't. Harvard MBA, artfully tousled hair, designer clothes, and the kind of confidence that comes from never having to work a blue-collar job to pay for college. He spoke in buzzwords about disrupting industries and leveraging synergies, while I built my wealth the old-fashioned way, one construction project at a time until I could start my own development company. From the moment Raymond appeared, I felt the distance growing between Sophia and me. Not dramatically, but like a tide slowly pulling away from shore. Suddenly, my stories about work sites and building codes seemed embarrassingly mundane next to Raymond's tales of wine tastings in Tuscany and startup conferences in Silicon Valley. "Dad, you have to understand," Sophia had told me 6 months ago, her voice taking on that patient tone people use when explaining obvious things to slow children. "Blake and I move in different circles now. We have colleagues, investors, people who expect a certain level. A certain level." As if the man who'd built her college fund one paycheck at a time wasn't sophisticated enough for her new world. The wedding planning had started innocently enough. Sophia called with breathless excitement about venues and themes, asking if I'd mind helping out financially since Raymond's family was a bit cash poor at the moment. Of course I said yes. What father wouldn't want to give his daughter her dream wedding? But helping out quickly became covering everything. When I asked to see the budget, Sophia brushed me off. "Don't worry about details, Dad. We've got this handled. We just need you to be our financial backup." Financial backup. Not father of the bride. Not honored guest. Backup. The exclusion happened gradually, like being slowly edited out of a photograph. At first, I was included in vendor meetings, sitting awkwardly in boutique showrooms while Sophia and Raymond discussed aesthetics and brand alignment with wedding planners who charged more per hour than I used to make per day. But my practical questions: why does a photographer cost $15,000? Do we really need ice sculptures? Were met with eye rolls and sighs. Dad just doesn't understand the wedding industry, I overheard Sophia telling Raymond one evening when they thought I was in the garage. He thinks everything should be practical and cheap. This isn't a construction site barbecue. The final straw came when I suggested they might want to scale back some of the more extravagant elements. We were sitting in the kitchen of the house I'd bought and paid for, discussing a floral arrangement that cost more than my first car. "Dad," Sophia said, her voice ice cold, "if you can't afford to give me the wedding I deserve, just say so. Raymond's family has standards to maintain. standards to maintain. With my money. That's when I made my first mistake. I kept writing checks instead of setting boundaries. The venue deposit, the caterer's advance, the photographer's retainer. Each time, Sophia would call with urgent deadlines and heartfelt pleas about how much this meant to her. And each time I transferred money I'd spent decades earning into accounts for a wedding I was increasingly unwelcome at. The official uninvitation came 3 weeks ago. Sophia's voice was bright and casual, as if she were discussing the weather. So, Dad, Raymond and I have been thinking, and we've decided to keep the ceremony really intimate. Just immediate family and our closest friends. You understand, right? It's not personal, we just want people there who really get what we're building together. I sat in stunned silence, processing what she'd just said. Sophia, I'm your father. How am I not immediate family? Of course you're family, Dad. But this is about our new life, our future. We want people there who are part of our world now. Raymond's investors will be there, some influencers who might feature us on their platforms. It's kind of a networking opportunity too. A networking opportunity. My daughter's wedding was a networking opportunity that I wasn't sophisticated enough to attend. But you still want me to pay for it, I said quietly. Well, yes, because you offered to help. This is your gift to us, Dad. Your way of showing you support our relationship. After I hung up, I sat in my empty house and tried to remember when my daughter had become someone I didn't recognize. The little girl who used to fall asleep in my lap during Disney movies had grown into a woman who saw her father as an ATM with inconvenient opinions. The morning I received the invoice, I called Sophia immediately. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number, whether from anger or heartbreak I couldn't tell. Dad. Perfect timing, she answered, her voice bubbly with excitement. Did you get our contribution request? Raymond's parents are so impressed that we have such a generous father. They're telling everyone about how supportive you are of our vision. Sophia, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, this bill is for over $125,000. I know. Isn't it exciting? We're having the wedding of the century. Chateau Belafonte is where tech royalty gets married. Raymond's connections got us the venue, but obviously we need financial backing to pull it off. And I'm not invited. Pause. Dad, we discussed this. It's an intimate ceremony for people in our circle. But your contribution makes you part of it in a different way. You're like, our silent partner. Silent partner. I was being asked to be a silent partner in my own daughter's wedding. Raymond's expecting the first payment by Friday, she continued. The venue requires 50% up front, and Chef Laurent needs his deposit to secure the date. Oh, and we upgraded the honeymoon suite in the Maldives. Raymond says we deserve the best after everything we've been through planning this. Everything they'd been through. While I'd been writing checks and getting excluded from my own investment. Sophia, I need to think about this. Think about what? Dad, you can't bail on us now. We've already sent invitations. Raymond's investor friends are expecting a certain standard. If we have to downgrade now, it'll be humiliating. For who? For all of us. For our reputation. Dad, Raymond's family already thinks you're... She stopped herself. Thinks I'm what? Another pause. Nothing. Look, just send the payment, okay? We're counting on you. After she hung up, I sat staring at the itemized bill. Each line item told a story of excess I'd never imagined. The flowers alone cost $8,000, more than I'd spent on my first truck. The photographer was charging $15,000 for what they called a luxury wedding experience with social media optimization. Even the wedding cake was $3,500 from some celebrity baker whose claim to fame was appearing on reality TV. But it was the last page that really got to me. Additional services, social media management and influencer coordination, $5,000. Wedding film production for online content, $8,000. Publication package for wedding magazines, $4,000. They weren't just having a wedding, they were producing a media event. And they wanted me to pay for the privilege of being excluded from it. I walked through my house that afternoon, really looking at it for the first time in months. The kitchen where I'd taught Sophia to cook scrambled eggs. The living room where we'd watched countless movies on Friday nights after her mother left. The garage where I'd helped her build school projects and where she'd learned to change a tire. This house represented 30 years of 12-hour days, missed social events and careful budgeting. I'd bought it with money earned from concrete dust in my lungs and calluses on my hands. Every room held memories of raising a daughter who now considered me too embarrassing to include in her special day. That evening Raymond called. It was the first time he'd contacted me directly in months. Mr. Caldwell, he said, his voice smooth and confident. Sophia mentioned you might have some concerns about the wedding investment. Investment. Not gift. Not father helping daughter. Investment. I have concerns about being asked to fund an event I'm not invited to, I said. He laughed, a sound like expensive wine being poured. I understand the optics might seem unusual, but think of it this way: you're investing in Sophia's happiness. And honestly, the networking potential for us at this event is incredible. Raymond Industries could really benefit from the connections we'll make. Raymond Industries. His startup that existed mainly on business cards and LinkedIn profiles. The people attending this wedding are decision makers, Mr. Caldwell. Your contribution isn't just paying for a party, it's funding Sophia's entry into a world of opportunity. A world that doesn't include her father. Well, different worlds have different expectations. I'm sure you understand. I understood perfectly. I understood that my blue-collar background was an embarrassment to them. I understood that they saw me as a walking wallet with inconvenient emotions. And I understood that they'd calculated exactly how much they could take from me while giving nothing back. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about a conversation I'd had with Sophia when she was 15. She'd come home crying because some kids at school had made fun of my work clothes when I picked her up. "I'm sorry, I'm not like other dads," I'd told her. "I know I don't wear suits or work in an office." "Don't say that," she'd said fiercely. "You're the best dad ever. You work harder than anyone and you take care of us. I'm proud of you." Where had that girl gone? When had she been replaced by someone who saw her father's love as an ATM and his presence as a liability? I made a decision that night, lying in the dark in the house I'd built through honest work and sacrifice. They wanted to treat me like a silent investor? Fine. But they were about to learn that investors have terms and conditions. The next morning, I did what I always do when facing a complex problem. I gathered information. 30 years in construction taught me that you don't start swinging hammers until you understand the structure you're working with. I started with the vendors listed on the bill. A few phone calls revealed some interesting details about payment schedules and cancellation policies. The venue, Chateau Belafonte, required 50% down and the balance 30 days before the event, with a clause that allowed them to cancel and keep the deposit if payments were late. The caterer had similar terms, and the photographer wouldn't even begin work without full payment up front. More importantly, I discovered that I was listed as the primary contact and financial guarantor for every single vendor. Not Sophia. Not Raymond. Me. They'd built their dream wedding entirely on my credit and reputation, then excluded me from attending it. I called my attorney, Margaret Wells, who'd handled my business contracts for 15 years. Margaret was a sharp woman in her 60s who'd built her practice representing small business owners like me against larger companies trying to squeeze them out. "Richard," she said after I explained the situation, "this is one of the most audacious things I've heard in 30 years of practice. They've essentially made you a non-consenting business partner in their wedding. What are my options?" "Well, since you're the primary financial contact, you have significant leverage. Every vendor contract requires your approval for payments. They can't move forward without your signature and your money. And if I don't sign? Then their dream wedding becomes a very expensive lesson in consequences." Margaret helped me understand the full scope of my legal position. Because Sophia and Raymond had no significant assets of their own, vendors had required a financially responsible guarantor me. This meant I wasn't just funding their wedding, I was legally responsible for every aspect of it. The interesting thing, Margaret noted, is that they've created a structure where they have all the control over planning but none of the financial responsibility. Classic having your cake and eating it too scenario. I spent the next 2 days diving deeper into their financial situation. What I found was even more troubling than I'd expected. Through a private investigator Margaret recommended, I learned that Raymond's startup was drowning in debt. His investors were mostly friends and family who'd loaned him money he couldn't repay. The vineyard his parents owned was mortgaged to the hilt. Sophia's financial situation wasn't much better. Despite her PhD and her job at a consulting firm, she was living paycheck to paycheck, funding a lifestyle that looked good on social media but was built entirely on credit cards and my occasional emergency loans. The wedding wasn't just expensive, it was their attempt to maintain an image of success while being broke. They were hoping the networking opportunities and social media content would somehow translate into the financial windfall they desperately needed. But the most revealing discovery came when I checked the guest list. The investigator had obtained a copy through a contact at the printing company. Of the 150 invited guests, I recognized maybe 20 names, distant relatives and a few of Sophia's old friends. The rest were Raymond's business contacts, social media influencers, and what appeared to be a collection of people they hoped to impress. This wasn't a wedding celebration. It was a business event disguised as a personal milestone, funded entirely by a father they were too embarrassed to include. I called my accountant, David Kim, who'd been managing my business finances for over a decade. David had started his practice around the same time I'd started my construction company, and we'd grown our businesses together through mutual respect and honest dealing. Richard, in all my years of practice, I've never seen anyone put themselves in this position voluntarily, David said after reviewing the vendor contracts. You're personally guaranteeing over $125,000 in expenses for an event that provides you no benefit and explicitly excludes you. What would you advise? From a purely financial perspective? Walk away. Let them figure out how to fund their own lifestyle fantasies. And from a father's perspective? David was quiet for a moment. That's above my pay grade. But I will say this, enabling someone's irresponsible behavior isn't the same as loving them. That evening, I sat in my home office, surrounded by vendor contracts, financial documents, and payment schedules. The picture that emerged was clear. Sophia and Raymond had built an elaborate house of cards entirely dependent on my money and reputation, while systematically excluding me from any meaningful role in the event I was funding. They'd made one critical error in their planning. They'd assumed my love for Sophia meant I would accept any treatment they chose to dish out. They'd counted on my quiet nature and history of generous support to ensure I'd write checks without asking questions or demanding respect. They were about to learn how wrong they were. I opened my laptop and began drafting a series of emails that would change everything. Not angry screeds or emotional ultimatums, but professional communications that would establish new terms for our business relationship. Because that's what they'd turned this into, a business relationship. And in business, leverage matters. I started with the vendors. As the primary contact and financial guarantor, I had the right to communicate directly with everyone involved in the wedding. My first call was to Chateau Belafonte. "This is Richard Caldwell," I told the events coordinator. "I'm the financial guarantor for the Thornfield Caldwell wedding. I need to establish some new payment protocols." "Of course, Mr. Caldwell. We've been expecting your deposit transfer. There's been a change in arrangements. All payments now require my written authorization. Please don't accept any instructions from the bride or groom regarding financial matters unless they come with my signature." Pause. That's unusual, sir. Is there a problem?" "No problem. Just establishing proper financial controls. You'll receive my written payment authorization within 48 hours, along with specific terms for the remaining balance." I had similar conversations with the caterer, photographer, florist, and every other vendor on the list. By the end of the day, I'd established myself as the sole financial decision-maker for every aspect of their wedding. Then I called Margaret to draft what she called a conditional funding agreement. It was a beautifully crafted document that laid out my terms in unambiguous legal language. 1. All wedding expenses would be funded through an escrow account requiring my approval for each disbursement. 2. Payment would be released only upon written confirmation that I was included as an honored guest with full family privileges. 3. Any vendor communications or changes had to be approved by me as the financial guarantor. 4. The agreement could be terminated by me at any time, with a 72-hour notice period. "This is brilliant," Margaret said as we reviewed the final draft. "You're not refusing to pay, you're establishing reasonable conditions for your financial support. They can't claim you're being vindictive or unreasonable." I had the document notarized and sent copies to every vendor, along with my new payment authorization requirements. Then I sent a copy to Sophia and Raymond with a simple cover letter. "Dear Sophia and Raymond, as the sole financial guarantor for your wedding, I've established new payment protocols to ensure proper oversight of the significant investment being made. Please review the attached agreement and let me know if you'd like to discuss the terms. Love, Dad." The response was immediate and explosive. Sophia called within an hour, her voice shrill with panic. "Dad, what is this? The venue just called saying they can't accept any payments without your written approval. You're going to ruin everything." "I'm not ruining anything," I said calmly. "I'm establishing proper financial controls for an investment of this magnitude." "Investment? Dad, this is my wedding." "Yes, it is. A wedding you've excluded me from while expecting me to fund entirely. This document simply ensures that my financial contribution is acknowledged appropriately. You can't do this. We have contracts, deadlines. And I'm honoring them all." As soon as we resolved the guest list situation, Raymond got on the phone, his usual smooth confidence replaced by barely controlled anger. "Mr. Caldwell, this is completely unacceptable. You're holding our wedding hostage." I'm not holding anything hostage, Raymond. I'm simply requiring that my role as financial supporter be acknowledged with appropriate inclusion in the event. This is extortion. No, this is business. You wanted to treat me like an investor rather than a father. Investors have terms and conditions. Over the next 48 hours, the pressure intensified. Vendors started calling me directly for payment authorizations. Each conversation was professionally cordial but made clear that without my approval, nothing could move forward. The photographer was the first to draw a line in the sand. Mr. Caldwell, I need the retainer by Friday or I'll have to release the date to my waitlist. Understood. You'll have my decision by Thursday. The caterer was next. Sir, we need confirmation on the menu by early next week. Without the deposit, we can't guarantee availability of the specialty items. I appreciate your patience. You'll hear from me soon. Each conversation was another turn of the screw, another reminder to Sophia and Raymond that their elaborate plans were entirely dependent on my cooperation. The breaking point came on Wednesday. Sophia showed up at my house unannounced, her eyes red from crying and her usual composure completely shattered. Dad, please, she said, standing in my doorway like a stranger. You're destroying everything we've worked for. What have you worked for, Sophia? You've planned a party with other people's money and excluded the person paying for it. It's not about the money. Then what is it about? She struggled for words, her face cycling through emotions I hadn't seen since she was a child having a tantrum. It's about our image. About the life Raymond and I are building. About respect. Respect, I repeated. Tell me about respect, Sophia. Tell me about the respect you've shown your father. You don't understand the pressures we're under. Raymond's family, his business contacts, the expectations. I understand perfectly. You're embarrassed by me. She started to deny it, then stopped. In that moment of silence, 30 years of love and sacrifice hung between us like a bridge that was crumbling. Dad, it's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You want my money but not my presence. You want me to fund your dreams but stay out of your spotlight. Raymond says that's just how business works. Different circles, different expectations. And what do you say, Sophia? Not what Raymond says. What do you say? She looked at me with eyes that reminded me of the little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, seeking comfort from the man who could make everything safe. But that little girl was gone, replaced by someone who saw her father as an obstacle to her aspirations. I say that sometimes sacrifices have to be made for the greater good. Then make them, I said quietly. Find another way to fund your greater good. She left without another word, and I knew that our relationship had crossed a line that might never be uncrossed. The morning of the wedding arrived gray and drizzling, as if the weather itself was commenting on the situation. I woke early, made coffee, and checked my phone for messages. There were 17 missed calls and dozens of texts from various vendors, Sophia, Raymond, and even Raymond's parents. The gist was simple. Without my signed payment authorization, the wedding was falling apart. At 8 a.m., Margaret called with an update. Richard, I've been fielding calls all morning. The venue is threatening to cancel without immediate payment. The caterer says they can't proceed without the deposit. Even the band is balking without confirmation. What about Sophia and Raymond? Radio silence from them directly, but their wedding planner has been calling every hour. Apparently they're trying to secure emergency funding from Raymond's family, but the vineyard is too leveraged to help. I spent the morning in my garden, tending to the tomatoes and peppers I'd planted in spring. There's something centering about working with soil and growing things. It reminds you what's real and what's just noise. At noon, my doorbell rang. I opened it to find Raymond's father, Harrison Thornfield, standing on my porch. He was a tall, silver-haired man with the kind of aristocratic bearing that comes from generations of inherited privilege. I'd met him only twice before at formal events where he'd treated me with polite condescension. Richard, he said, extending his hand as if we were old friends. I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. Not at all. Come in. He stepped into my modest living room and glanced around with the expression of someone examining a quaint historical exhibit. I understand there's been some confusion about the wedding arrangements. No confusion on my part. He smiled the way politicians smile when they're about to ask for something expensive. Raymond tells me you've established some new payment protocols. I wanted to discuss a resolution that benefits everyone. I'm listening. The Thornfield family has a reputation to maintain. This wedding has been anticipated by some very important people in our social and business circles. Canceling now would be problematic. For who? For all of us. Richard, I'll be frank, We need this event to proceed as planned. Raymond's business prospects depend on the connections he'll make today. And what does that have to do with me? Harrison's composure cracked slightly. You're the financial guarantor. Without your authorization, none of our vendors can proceed. I'm aware. So what will it take? Name your price. I set down my coffee cup and looked at this man who'd raised a son to see other people as stepping stones to success. Mr. Thornfield, you seem to think this is a negotiation about money. Isn't it? No. This is about respect. Your son and my daughter have treated me like an ATM for months while planning an event they're too embarrassed to include me in. That's not a financial problem, it's a character problem. Richard, be reasonable. Different social circles have different dynamics. You wouldn't be comfortable with the people attending today. Because I'm not sophisticated enough? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. Because it's a different world. Business networking, social positioning, it's not personal. Everything about this is personal. That's my daughter getting married today. And she can still get married. Just sign the payment authorizations and everyone gets what they want. Everyone except me. Harrison's mask finally slipped completely. What do you want? Money? Business deal? Name it. I want to be treated like a father instead of a bank. I want my daughter to remember that love and loyalty matter more than image and networking. That's not realistic in today's world. Then maybe today's world needs to learn some hard lessons. He left shortly after, his aristocratic composure replaced by barely controlled panic. I imagined him calling Raymond with the news that the family ATM couldn't be bought with promises or connections. At 2 p.m. Sophia called one last time. Dad, please. I'm begging you. The venue is about to cancel. Chef Laurent is packing up his equipment. The photographer is already gone. Then maybe it's time to consider what really matters. What matters is that I'm supposed to be getting married in 3 hours and everything is falling apart. Nothing important is falling apart, Sophia. The only thing crumbling is the facade you've built around what should be a celebration of love. You're destroying my life. No, sweetheart. I'm trying to save it. But you have to want to be saved. The line went quiet except for the sound of her crying, the first genuine emotion I'd heard from her in months. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. Start by remembering who loves you and who's always been there for you. Then ask yourself if those people deserve to be part of your life, not just your bank account. At 4 p.m., the time when Sophia should have been walking down an aisle I'd paid for but wasn't allowed to see, Margaret called with the final update. It's over, Richard. The venue canceled and kept the deposit. The caterer packed up and left. Word is spreading through their social circle that the wedding collapsed due to financial problems. How are they handling it? Raymond's apparently in full damage control mode, trying to spin this as a postponement rather than a cancellation. But the truth has a way of getting out. And Sophia? No word yet. But Richard, you did the right thing. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and watched the sun set over the garden I'd tended for 30 years. Somewhere across town, my daughter was learning what happens when you mistake generosity for weakness and love for entitlement. I didn't feel victorious. I felt like a father who'd been forced to teach his child a lesson that should never have been necessary. 3 days passed in complete silence. No calls, no texts, no angry visits. I went about my normal routine work, grocery shopping, maintaining the house, while processing what had happened and what it meant for the future. On Thursday evening my doorbell rang again. This time it was Sophia, alone. She looked exhausted, her usual polished appearance replaced by jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt. Her eyes were puffy from crying, and she carried herself like someone who'd been forced to confront some hard truths. Can we talk? She asked quietly. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in the living room where I'd read her bedtime stories and helped with homework projects. The silence stretched between us like a canyon neither of us was sure how to cross. The wedding's off, she finally said. Not postponed. Off. I'm sorry you're hurting. Are you? Because it feels like you wanted this to happen. I considered my words carefully. I wanted you to understand that relationships have to be based on mutual respect. What I'm sorry about is that it took such drastic measures to get your attention. Raymond's furious. He says you sabotaged us out of jealousy. What do you say? She was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands folded in her lap. I say I don't know who I am anymore. Tell me about that. When I was with Raymond, everything was about image and networking and being the right kind of person. I got so caught up in that world that I forgot about the people who actually matter. And now I'm sitting in the house where my dad raised me, trying to figure out how I became someone who would exclude him from the most important day of my life. The words hung between us, honest and painful. Sophia, I need you to understand something. I didn't do this to punish you. I did it because I love you too much to let you turn into someone who uses people. I know. Her voice was barely a whisper. Raymond's been calling me selfish and ungrateful, saying I should have made you pay regardless. But Dad, hearing him talk about you like you're just a source of money, it made me sick. Raymond's not a bad person, I said carefully. But he's someone who sees relationships as transactions. You're not. How do you know? After everything I did, how can you be sure? Because you're here. Because you're questioning what happened instead of just blaming me for it. She started crying then, the kind of tears that come from deep shame and recognition. I'm so sorry, Dad. I treated you terribly. I was so focused on impressing Raymond's world that I forgot about my own. Apology accepted. But Sophia, words are easy. The hard part is rebuilding trust. How do I do that? Start by being honest about what you really want, not what you think will impress other people. Figure out who you are when you're not performing for an audience. We talked until nearly midnight, the longest real conversation we'd had in 2 years. She told me about the pressure she'd felt to live up to Raymond's expectations, about how she'd gradually lost herself in trying to become someone worthy of his world. I told her about watching my little girl disappear and being replaced by someone I didn't recognize. What happens now? She asked as she prepared to leave. That's up to you. We can rebuild our relationship, but it has to be based on honesty and mutual respect. And the money? All those vendor deposits you didn't authorize. Gone. Consider it tuition for an expensive lesson. She nodded, accepting the financial loss without argument. I need to figure out my life. Raymond and we're not good for each other. I think I knew that, but I was too proud to admit it. Take your time. I'll be here when you're ready. 6 months later, Sophia had ended her engagement to Raymond and moved into her own apartment. She kept her job but started living within her means instead of maintaining an image she couldn't afford. Our relationship was still healing, but it was based on genuine connection rather than financial dependence. She called me every Sunday not to ask for money but to talk about her week, her struggles, her small victories. She was discovering who she was when she wasn't trying to be someone else's ideal. Dad, she said during one of our calls, I need to tell you something. Raymond's getting married next month to one of his investors' daughters. The wedding is being featured in 3 magazines. How do you feel about that? Grateful, she said without hesitation. Grateful that I learned the difference between a wedding and a marriage before it was too late. The irony wasn't lost on me. By refusing to fund Sophia's dream wedding, I'd saved her from a nightmare marriage. As I finished telling this story, Sophia and I have built something stronger than we ever had before, a relationship based on mutual respect rather than financial dependency. She's learned to value substance over image, and I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses. The $125,000 wedding that never happened taught us both invaluable lessons. Sophia learned that authentic relationships matter more than impressive connections. I learned that love without boundaries isn't love at all, it's enabling. Raymond, meanwhile, continues to live in his world of smoke and mirrors, funded now by his new wife's family money. I hear through mutual acquaintances that his startup is still struggling, that his vineyard is still losing money, and that his marriage is already showing signs of strain. Some people never learn that you can't build a life on other people's foundations. The vendors eventually moved on to other events, though I suspect some of them learned valuable lessons about vetting financial guarantors more carefully. The venue coordinator, in particular, called me months later to thank me for teaching them about the importance of proper payment protocols. A year after the wedding that wasn't, Sophia started dating Frank, a teacher she met at a community volunteer event. He drives a 10-year-old Honda, lives in a modest apartment, and has never asked me for a dime. What he does have is integrity, kindness, and genuine love for my daughter. When they decided to get engaged, Sophia called me with a different kind of excitement than I'd heard before. Dad, Frank proposed and I said yes. We want to have a simple ceremony in your backyard if that's okay. Maybe 30 people, homemade food, and the kind of celebration that's about family instead of image. That sounds perfect, I told her and meant every word. And Dad? We want to pay for it ourselves. Frank has been saving and I've been putting money aside too. We want our wedding to represent who we really are, not who we think we should be. The wedding they planned cost less than the flowers alone would have cost for the Chateau Belafonte extravaganza. But it was infinitely more beautiful because it was genuine. Sophia wore a simple dress she bought off the rack, Frank wore a suit he already owned, and their joy was radiant in a way that no amount of professional photography could have captured. I walked my daughter down the aisle in my own backyard, past the tomato plants and rose bushes I'd tended for decades. The officiant was Frank's pastor, a man who'd known him since childhood and spoke about love as a daily choice rather than a fairy tale fantasy. The reception was potluck style, with dishes made by family members who wanted to contribute something personal to the celebration. Instead of a professional DJ, Frank's brother brought his guitar and led sing-alongs that had everyone laughing and crying in equal measure. As I watched Sophia dance with her new husband under string lights I'd hung myself, I realized that this modest backyard celebration was everything the $125,000 spectacle could never have been: authentic, meaningful, and surrounded by people who genuinely loved the couple. The real victory wasn't in stopping a wedding or teaching expensive lessons. The real victory was in helping my daughter remember who she really was underneath all the pressure to be someone else. Raymond had tried to mold Sophia into his vision of the perfect wife, sophisticated, connected, willing to prioritize image over substance. For a while she'd lost herself in that role, convinced that love meant becoming whoever your partner needed you to be. By refusing to fund that transformation, I'd forced her to confront what she was willing to sacrifice for acceptance. The answer, thankfully, was that she wasn't willing to sacrifice herself or her family for someone else's approval. The financial lesson was important too. Sophia learned to live within her means, to value financial independence, and to understand that money is a tool for building the life you want, not for impressing people you don't really like. But the most important lesson was about respect. Real love, whether romantic, familial, or friendship, requires mutual respect. It means valuing someone for who they are, not what they can do for you. It means including the people who matter in your joys, not just your emergencies. 3 years later, Sophia and Frank bought their first house, a modest starter home they could afford on their combined teacher and consultant salaries. They invited me over for dinner the night they got the keys, and we celebrated with pizza and beer while sitting on folding chairs in their empty living room. "Dad," Sophia said, raising her bottle in a toast, "thank you for teaching me that the best things in life aren't the most expensive ones. And thank you for remembering that your old man isn't just a bank account with opinions," I replied. Frank laughed. "From what I hear, he's a bank account with very good opinions." "The best," Sophia said, smiling at me with the same genuine affection I remembered from her childhood. "The absolute best." If you're a parent listening to this story, wondering if you're being too generous or not generous enough, let me offer some hard-won wisdom. Love your children enough to let them fail. Support their dreams but don't fund their delusions. Teach them the difference between wants and needs, between image and substance, between networking and genuine relationships. Most importantly, never let anyone, even your own children, treat you as if your only value is financial. You are not an ATM with emotions. You are a whole person deserving of respect, inclusion, and genuine affection. Setting boundaries doesn't make you selfish, it makes you wise. Saying no to unreasonable demands doesn't make you unloving. It makes you someone who understands that love without respect is just manipulation. And remember, the goal isn't to control your adult children's choices, but to make sure they understand the consequences of those choices. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is step back and let reality be their teacher. The $125,000 wedding bill that started this whole saga now sits in a frame in my home office, not as a trophy but as a reminder. A reminder that money can't buy respect, that image isn't worth sacrificing substance, and that sometimes the most expensive lessons are the most valuable ones. Sophia keeps a copy too, though hers is in a folder marked, "Mistakes I Won't Make Again." She's told me that whenever she's tempted to make decisions based on what other people think rather than what she knows is right, she looks at that bill and remembers what happens when you lose sight of what really matters. As for Raymond, I heard he's planning another elaborate wedding for next year, this time funded by his third wife's family money. Some people never learn. But that's not my story to tell. My story is about a father who loved his daughter enough to risk their relationship to save it. About a daughter who was brave enough to admit she'd lost her way and worked to find it again. About the truth that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in relationships built on mutual respect and genuine love. And about the fact that sometimes, the best gift you can give someone is refusing to give them what they think they want so they can discover what they actually need. The wedding that never happened became the foundation for a marriage that's built to last. And that, my friends, is worth far more than any amount of money I could have spent on flowers and photographers. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Share your own experiences in the comments. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you handle situations where love and money became tangled together? Remember, you teach people how to treat you. Make sure the lessons you're teaching are the ones you want them to learn. And sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to say no.